That's right. Got the tiger suit on. It's gonna be a good video. Actually, it's gonna be a good video because I want to talk about this. I have this open. Lamoresca Mascalisi. I'm getting ready to do a Zoom seminar about Sicily. I've been doing seminars on Zoom, but with pre-poured little tiny samples that hospitality people, like restaurant people, can come pick up at the warehouse, and then at a prearranged time have this Zoom call, taste through the wines, talk about the place, free wine education. Anyway, hopefully you know at this point that I love Sicily. Sicily is just an amazing, unique, cool place. Lamoresca Mascalisi. So I'm getting ready for the seminar, and helps to drink some cool Sicilian wines. Lamoresca. So Lamoresca is down at the southern edge of the Catania, whatever that is, region. Catania is a city there on the east coast, at the foot of Mount Etna, east coast of Sicily. But this is from, I forget how far south. It's a ways. It's a long drive. You can see Mount Etna, but it's like this. It's way out there on the horizon. You have to actually look for it to see it. It's maybe a 45 minutes, hour drive from Etna. San Michele di Gonzaria is the name of the town. So made by Filippo Rizzo, who is from here, who's from the area, San Michele di Gonzaria, but spent a large portion of his life in Belgium, where he had a small restaurant, or worked in several restaurants, had his own restaurant, worked retail, did a bunch of stuff with wine there. Had a small restaurant. Like he was into and selling natural wines like 15 years ago, like a long time ago now, before natural wine was really a thing. Anyway, so he was there, and he was buying wine from this Belgian guy who was selling wine, who was distributing wine. He was buying wine from this Belgian guy by the name of Frank Cornelissen. So anyway, small world, right? So anyway, Frank ends up moving back to Sicily, and or moving to Sicily to make wine, to Mount Etna, and I don't know how it went, but I'm sure Frank was talking to his acquaintance friend Filippo and being like, hey, I'm moving to Sicily. You're from Sicily. Tell me about Sicily and stuff. And then actually Filippo decided to move back to Sicily as well because, I don't know, he just had enough of living in the city, being in Belgium and stuff. So he moves back to San Michele di Gonzaria, and Filippo buys a small farm. I forget how big it was at the time when he bought it, but it was primarily old olive trees, but it had like a acre or two of old grapevines there, Frappato Neradavola, little bit of Grenache, which I forget what it's called there, anyway, and a little bit of Vernaccia, I think, Vermentino, a little bit of Vermentino. So Filippo is thinking like, oh, I'm going to make olive oil, because olive trees don't take a lot of work to take care of and manage and stuff like that. But he gets there, he starts doing stuff, and he's like, I've got these old vines, I'm going to stay making wine. And Frank is there on Mount Etna, and so Filippo goes and starts working with Frank and helping him out and stuff like that. And then Filippo starts planting vines, and then Filippo buys more land. And so I went at the end of 2019 and visited Filippo, and San Michele di Gonzaria, and specifically the spot where Filippo is a pretty impressive, beautiful place. It's these rolling hills, like 450 meters above sea level, inland from Syracuse, sort of on the way to Gela, down there in that corner of Sicily, close to the ocean. You can't see the ocean there, but it's not that far away. Rolling hills. Filippo's winery and house are on this hilltop, looking down over his vineyards, out at the hills in this little valley. He had just bought this crazy little sandstone outcropping like across the valley from him that had this old abandoned fallen down house to it, and he was rebuilding that to be like an agriturismo, and he was going to plant some more vines over there. There were, I think there were some olive trees over there, and there were a whole lot of ficadindia, prickly pear cactuses that he was going to start farming. Anyway, Filippo just can't help himself from like tinkering and doing stuff and trying to like make things better. Like he moved to Sicily, it sounded like almost sort of to kind of retire, and then he was just like, oh, I could do this, oh, I could do that, I could do this, I could do that, oh, and started doing it, and then he was like, oh, this is, we were talking about his wines, and he's pretty famous for his frappatos, the Nero Capitano, and he was, we were talking in the evening, and he was like, everybody wants Nero Capitano, everybody wants frappato, I'm going to focus on Nero d'Avola now, people need to not just drink frappato, I'm going to show people how great Nero d'Avola was, and we started tasting through like special Nero d'Avolas he was working on in the winery, and they're beautiful, beautiful wines. Anyway, so he just kept getting sucked into it. So he started really making wine. His winery is tiny. It's like the basement of his house. It's very clean. It's very serious, but it's small. He doesn't have that much space for the amount of wine that he's making. I mean, he doesn't even make that much wine, but he doesn't have a lot of space for the wine that he's making. His basket press is like this big around. The soil is a lot of like decayed sandstone, like light sandy sandstone with like then a bunch of clay lower down the hillsides, iron-rich clay, some mica in the soil. We went over to the new piece of land that he'd bought across the valley, and walking around in it, the soil, it was like so soft and spongy, the eroded sandstone. It was like, it felt like walking on the moon. Like you'd take a step and there'd be this like little poof, and you could just, your foot would sink like an inch into the like light airy like eroded sandstone sand that was there. That was soil that he he said he would plant frappato on. Anyway, so he's out there in like the middle of nowhere, basically. Like there's nothing really around. There's no other wineries around close to him. So this is Mascalisi, which, as you might guess. So this is actually primarily Nerello Mascalese from Mount Etna that Filippo, has a contract with like a little vineyard there to get Nerello Mascalese, brings it back here to his winery, spontaneous fermentation, no added yeast, no nothing. It's not temperature controlled, but the winery is super, super well like insulated. The tanks are not temperature controlled. The winery is kept relatively cool. Fermentation happens over like 4 weeks. It's relatively cold down there in the winter. I was there in the autumn. It was pretty cool, temperature-wise. Also just cool. But he adds frappato to this because, he's not on Mount Etna, and like, why try to just make a Mount Etna wine where he's not on Mount Etna and stuff? Filippo likes being different. Filippo likes doing things his own way. He's definitely his own person, wants to differentiate himself from everybody else. So it's mostly Nerello Mascalese, but with some frappato blended in to make it a little bit brighter, to make it give it a little bit more of an uplift, a little bit more of like a pretty aromatic quality. Which, I mean, Nerello already has a kind of pretty aromatic quality. Anyway, very cool. I believe no sulfur added to this too. Not filtered, not fined. Smells very like pure. Cherry, raspberry, like ripe cherry. Little bit of like red currant. This is the 2017 vintage, which I want to say was a pretty good vintage on Mount Etna. It's 14% alcohol, but you don't taste it. That's actually, I think, lower than some other vintages of this that I've had. I want to say maybe it was the 15 that was a little bit higher in alcohol and was like a little bit spicier. This one is very pretty. It does have like the sort of like ripe cherry concentrated sort of like cherry aroma that I associate with Nerello Mascalisi, but it's definitely, it is prettier. It's a little bit like headier smelling. Full-bodied, long finish. Great, like the tannins are there, but there's the fruit is right there through the finish. Really long, really lingers. Really pure, pretty, like raspberry at first, then more cherry. The finish tightens up, more tannin comes in. It gets kind of savory, a little woodsy. There's definitely like a woodsy, long, savory, almost like it's meaty in the way that like roasted like shiitake mushroom is meaty. This flavor that lingers after the finish. Like it's not, I don't want to say mushroomy, because when I say mushroomy, people think of like weird or funky or something like that. But if you think of like sauteed, like shiitake mushrooms, something like that, where they just like, they have this real meaty sort of earthy flavor. That's a little bit actually like the flavor that I get after the finish here. There's just so much pure, pretty fruit all the way through. It's just a little bit brighter than if it was Nerello Mascalisi. There's like that dense cherry Nerello Mascalisi fruit and tannin, but there's a little bit more like bright raspberry that is the frappato coming through that I get in the beginning, and also sort of into the mid palate, and it just sort of like perks the wine up a little bit. It's really nice, and I feel like the frappato also adds a little bit more acidity to the opening of the wine, and also sort of gives the wine a little bit more of like a woo, like fun pop, like right as you start drinking it, which just overall makes the wine seem a little bit like more fun than 100% Nerello Mascalisi, which usually comes across like pretty serious. Overall, very serious wine. It's extremely well balanced. Has relatively actually a lot of power that you don't exactly, it doesn't like hit you as a really powerful wine, because there's that pretty fruit and because it's so well balanced. And particularly in the mid palate, there's a little like undertone of like woodsier, slightly like brambly, like blackberry, sort of like savory, wild, like wild, like raspberry, black raspberry, like in underneath there, sort of like underpinning the fruit in the mid palate. It's really lovely. This vintage is fantastic. I'm really excited about this. I have like 1.5 cases left. Really glad that I decided to open a bottle and see what it was doing. So there we go. Now I've got to go race 10 miles over in Cape Elizabeth. Not in this tiger suit. I'm going to put a bunch of Crow Athletics stuff on for that. But nice day for it.